Now what do you do when you're lonesome? Where do you go when you're blue? And how do you deal with such emotion when you just...
Good morning, friends. Cable Smith welcoming everybody back to the Cabela's Lone Star Outdoor Show, powered by Chevy Silverado and, of course, Hoff Power Polaris. Great tune there from Justin Towns Earl bringing us back. What do you do when you're lonely is the name of that one. We are about to talk some white-tailed deer here, and so fittingly, this segment is proudly brought to you by Sendero Seed Company, Texas' premier seed company. They've got everything you need to keep your whitetail herd happy and healthy. Give my buddy Rob Hughes a call at 1-877-610-SEED, or you can check them out at senderoseed.com. Well, as I alluded to before the commercial break, there's some hotly contested legislation being debated right now in the Texas House, and two groups are really at the forefront of this recently introduced legislation. It hasn't been passed. It's just been proposed. And those organizations are the Texas Deer Association and the Texas Wildlife Association. First and foremost, I want to be on record as saying both of these organizations are fabulous. They've done great things and will continue to do great things. But in this situation, one of them has grossly overstepped their bounds, in my opinion. And we will explain all of that right now, as it is my pleasure to welcome Texas Deer Association board member and longtime deer breeder Dick Cain to the program.
No problem. I'm glad to be with you.
We are certainly glad to have you, Mr. Cain. Now, I know you've been on the board of the Texas Deer Association for the past 7 or 8 years. Go ahead and talk a little bit about your background, however, as a deer breeder.
My experience with deer breeding, both from out in the pasture and then from my ranch. I guess we've raised deer for a while, and prior to that, I was a consulting biologist back in the 70s and 80s. While I was at Texas A&M, we also had a consulting practice working with ranchers and, flying helicopter census and providing hunter harvest recommendations and so forth for ranchers. So been doing a lot of work with deer for a long time. And back in 2003, we started on this particular ranch here raising some of our own deer. So we've been doing it for a little better than 10 years now.
All right. So it's fair to say that you have quite a background in whitetails and deer breeding. Now, here's the bit of controversy. There is a 80-year-old rule here in Texas that requires whitetail bucks released for pasture stalkers to be released at least 10 days prior to the opening of the season. Well, here's where the TDA and the Texas Wildlife Association are butting heads, as the Texas Wildlife Association is backing the proposed legislation that would see that rule changed from 10 days to 60 days. And, Dick, there obviously are problems associated with that line of thought. It looks like, to me, they're trying to demonize deer breeders, and, it's also a private property issue.
Well, you referred to 80-year-old rule. It's been, it's been called the 10-day rule. When it was originally proposed, it was proposed for all game species, dealing, for example, with game birds and exotics and deer and so forth. And then it's been modified over the years. So now it really only applies to deer. And what it says is no deer with antlers may be released any sooner than 10 days prior to the beginning of any season, unless their antlers are cut between the G2 and G3 to alter their trophy quality. In other words, it's meant so that we don't have canned hunting opportunities. So there's got to be at least 10 days for the animals. Actually, the 11th day would be the first time they could be hunted, and we support that. We think that's a good rule. There's 2 other states in the country that have that same thing, and it gives the animals time to become adapted to their new environment and so forth, and TDA strongly supports that.
Right.
So I'll give you a little background because I've been at several meetings with both TDA and TWA members, and their initial proposal was they thought the animals ought to be released in the springtime. Their reasoning for that, they gave several reasons, one of which was the animals would grow more normal-looking antlers. And I think therein lies the crux of it. Testimony and also a presentation by their president recently indicated that with the last, since about 08, 09, when the economy went off a little bit, that was also the time when there started to be a fair number of animals being released, stocker deer released, because the deer breeding program was beginning to materialize or mature. And they said that it had been tremendous competition. It had really cut down on their opportunity to book hunts on low-fence pastures. Mm-hmm. And so they wanted to have a spring release. That then was changed. They decided that maybe a 60-day release was something better. That's what they proposed in a bill. And, of course, we fought that tooth and nail, because that would mean deer would have to be released in the middle of July, which two reasons, I think, scientifically would be, anybody understands, that's 105 to 110 degree weather. And so that's not good for any animals to be hauled, released, done anything with.
Oh, yeah, just the transportation in that kind of heat could have fatal repercussions, no doubt about it.
Well, plus you're putting deer out there. None of us handle any of our deer in the summertime. They're growing antlers then. And anybody that knows anything about deer growing antlers, that's the time when they're in full velvet. Their antlers, the deer don't move around a lot in the brush. The wild deer don't move around much because they don't want to bump those antlers. Mm-hmm. If they bump the antlers, they begin to bleed. And that then causes infection problems, all kinds of other animal issues that sure. That everybody wants to avoid.
Well, it's a consumer-driven marketplace, and like it or not, high fence, low fence, no fence, I'm in favor of all of them, so long as you're hunting ethically. But for the low fence guys to try to turn the tables in their favor, and let me just back up and say that I've never shot a whitetail behind a high fence. I have shot exotics, and I have no problem with it. But you can't, for me, you can't tell people what they can and can't do on their own place.
Exactly. And I think if you look at the data over the last, even with all the habitat management that's been done out there, low fence, high fence, people putting feeders out, low fence, high fence, and so forth, the trophy quality or the antler score hasn't really increased a whole lot in the last 10 years. Mm-hmm. But what has increased a whole lot is the ability for hunters to get an animal that is 150 to 200 inches because of the genetic opportunities that have been afforded by the deer breeding industry.
Sure.
And that's where the issue is. The issue is, our deer on these low fence places aren't worth as much as though deer that may be on high fence places where they've had some genetic opportunity to grow bigger deer.
And as far as deer breeding goes and growing big deer, we're talking about an industry that in 2007, Texas A&M did a study, and they valued the deer breeding industry in Texas at around $650 million. Now, it's probably closer to $1 billion a year industry now, so we are talking about a lot of money being pumped into the Texas economy.
Let's say a very significant alternative business that keeps small ranchers and rural people employed. The feed bills, the fencing, the equipment, everything else puts a lot of people to work out in rural Texas.
Oh yeah,
and that's an important thing.
Oh yeah, we have a sponsor, Ben Lofton Fencing, and the majority of their business comes from erecting high fences all over Texas.
Cable, it also provides increased hunting opportunity. If you look at the last data from the last 4 years, while we've had a downturn in the economy, the number of Texas hunting licenses has increased. Mm-hmm. We've had more people coming from out of state, more local people that have bought hunting licenses. So while some folks may say their business has gone down, the facts are that hunting opportunities have gone up. And we believe that a fair number of those hunting opportunity increases have come from the Texas Deer Breeding Association.
Yes, indeed. And let me just say also that I'm a big fan of the Texas Wildlife Association. They have done great things over the years. No doubt in my mind they will continue to do great things, but they're just